shadows, and dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Fiona Reed pushed her cleaning cart down the 42nd floor of Blackwell Tower. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and the executive offices were emptying of their daytime occupants. Men and women in tailored suits strode past her with their eyes fixed on phones or distant thoughts, none seeing the woman in the gray uniform who kept their world spotless. Fiona preferred it this way. Invisibility had its advantages. In the shadows between being seen, she observed life with the careful eye of an artist. Each night after work, her tiny apartment became a sanctuary where paintbrushes and canvases transformed her from nobody to creator. Her paintings, vibrant cityscapes and portraits filled with emotion, lined her walls like windows to another life, one where she wasn't just passing through unnoticed. "Excuse me," a deep voice cut through her thoughts. Fiona looked up to see Harrison Wells, CEO of Blackwell Industries, standing impatiently beside her cart. At 38, his presence commanded attention. Sharp gray eyes that analyzed everything as assets or liabilities, dark hair with precise silver at the temples, and a perpetual furrow between his brows that spoke of ambition never quite satisfied. "Sorry, Mr. Wells," she murmured, pulling her cart aside. She knew his name, as did everyone in the building. He'd graced magazine covers as the financial prodigy who transformed his father's struggling company into a global powerhouse. His gaze passed over her like she was part of the furniture. "The Anderson files should have been delivered to my office an hour ago. Tell whoever's responsible they're needed immediately." "I'm the cleaning staff, sir," Fiona said quietly. Don't handle—" But he was already walking away, phone to his ear, problem delegated and forgotten. Fiona sighed, used to such interactions. In 3 years of working at Blackwell, she'd spoken more words to the maintenance door than to actual people. Later that evening, as the floor emptied completely, Fiona enjoyed the peaceful solitude. She hummed softly while cleaning the glass-walled conference room, admiring the cityscape beyond. From this height, the world looked different. Lights twinkling like stars, people reduced to moving specks. Sometimes she sketched this view from memory, trying to capture the beauty that existed alongside the loneliness. "Still here?" The voice startled her. Josephine Barnes, Harrison's executive assistant, stood in the doorway with a kind smile. Unlike her boss, Josephine had always acknowledged Fiona's existence. "Just finishing up," Fiona replied, grateful for the human connection. Josephine nodded toward the open sketchbook peeking from Fiona's uniform pocket. "You're always drawing. Are you an artist?" The question made Fiona's cheeks warm. "I try to be. Nothing professional." "Don't sell yourself short," Josephine said. "We all have hidden depths." She glanced at her watch. "I'd better go. Harrison needs these contracts reviewed before tomorrow's merger meeting." After Josephine left, Fiona finished her shift and headed home to her apartment in the Westridge district, a neighborhood that had once been respectable but now wore neglect like an old coat. Her building's elevator had been temporarily out of service for 2 years, so she climbed 6 flights of stairs, her legs heavy with exhaustion. Her apartment door stuck as always, requiring a firm shoulder push. Inside, the space was small but meticulously organized. Paintings and sketches covered every wall, her real life hidden from the world that saw only a cleaner. She dropped her keys into a bowl painted with forget-me-nots, a reminder from her childhood at Meadowbrook Home for Children that someone had once noticed her. Fiona changed into paint-splattered clothes and stood before an unfinished canvas. Tonight's subject was a woman standing at a crossroads, face turned away from the viewer. Fiona had been working on it for weeks, unable to decide which path the woman would choose or what expression should grace her face. "Another day, another dollar," she whispered to herself, picking up a brush. "And another chance to create something beautiful." Unknown to Fiona, Across town in a penthouse office, Harrison Wells reviewed a mysterious file that had appeared on his desk, a file containing information about Hawthorne Sustainable Developments and its missing heir. The name meant nothing to him yet, but by tomorrow it would change everything. Forgotten letters. The law offices of Winthrop and Associates occupied a modest brownstone that seemed out of place among the sleek skyscrapers of downtown. Fiona checked the address on the letter for the third time, still bewildered by its contents. The cream-colored envelope had arrived yesterday, bearing official letterhead and words that seemed meant for someone else. Urgent matter regarding your inheritance and the Hawthorne estate. She smoothed her simple blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, and entered the building with cautious steps. Ms. Reed, a silver-haired woman, greeted her from behind an antique desk. "Mr. Winthrop is expecting you." The office she was led to contained more books than furniture. Behind a desk cluttered with papers sat Edmund Winthrop, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and a bow tie that seemed from another era entirely. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. "I've been searching for you for quite some time." Fiona perched on the edge of the seat. "There must be a mistake. I don't have any family." "That's what the records at Meadowbrook suggested," Winthrop said, placing a folder before him. "But records can be incomplete or deliberately obscured." He opened the folder, revealing a photograph of a young couple standing before a striking modern building. The woman had Fiona's same auburn hair and upturned nose. "Eleanor and Thomas Hawthorne," Winthrop explained. "Your grandparents. Eleanor was a pioneering architect in sustainable design, Thomas an environmental engineer. They created Hawthorne Sustainable Developments in the 1970s, long before green building was fashionable." Fiona stared at the photograph, searching for something familiar in the strangers' faces. "If they were my grandparents, where were they when I was growing up in Meadowbrook?" Winthrop's expression softened. "They died in a plane crash when your mother, Diana, was just 20. She married young, unwisely perhaps, to a man named James Reed. When Diana died in childbirth, James was meant to raise you, but he abandoned me," Fiona finished, the old wound still tender. "I was left at Meadowbrook when I was 3. I barely remember him. What James Reed never knew," Winthrop continued, "was that Diana had inherited everything from her parents, held in trust, until she turned 30. When she died, that trust transferred to you, with specific instructions that you couldn't be contacted until your 28th birthday." "Which was last month," Fiona whispered, the timeline aligning with chilling precision. "Exactly." Winthrop slid forward a thick legal document. "The Hawthorne Foundation has assets exceeding $200 million, including the architectural firm, real estate holdings, and substantial investments in sustainable technology. As the sole heir, it all belongs to you now." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Fiona gripped the chair arms. "This can't be real." "It's very real," Winthrop assured her. "And there's more. The Hawthorne estate, a remarkable example of sustainable architecture, has been maintained these past 25 years, waiting for your return." He passed her a small key attached to a silver keychain shaped like a bird in flight. "The nightingale was your grandmother's signature incorporated into all her designs. She believed beauty and function should never be separated." Fiona touched the silver bird with trembling fingers. "I don't know the first thing about running a foundation or a company. The foundation has been managed by a board of trustees, including myself. They've done well, but decisions regarding the Hawthorne vision have been at a standstill, awaiting your direction." Winthrop smiled gently. "Your grandmother's journals and designs are preserved at the estate. Perhaps they'll help you find your way." As Fiona left the office an hour later, her mind swirled with names, figures, and responsibilities. The weight of the nightingale key in her pocket seemed impossibly heavy for such a small object. Outside, the afternoon sunlight caught the glass facade of Blackwell Tower in the distance, reminding her of her other life, the one where she was invisible. She'd called in sick today, something she'd never done before. By tomorrow, she would need to give notice. The thought brought both liberation and terror. Unknown to Fiona, Harrison Wells was at that moment standing in his office, staring at the same building she was now departing. The name Winthrop had appeared in his morning briefing regarding a crucial development project, Blackwell's planned acquisition of riverfront property for a luxury complex. The property was currently held by the Hawthorne Foundation, which had refused to sell despite increasingly generous offers. "Sir," his assistant Josephine said, entering with a folder, "the background report on Hawthorne Foundation you requested." Harrison took the file, scanning quickly. "They've been rudderless for years. Why suddenly take a hard line on the riverfront project?" Josephine hesitated. "That's the development. They've located the Hawthorne heir. The foundation will now be under new direction." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Who is this heir? Where have they been?" "The information is limited. A woman named Fiona Reed." She placed a small photograph on his desk, a grainy security image from the building's entrance. "She was meeting with Edmund Winthrop today." Harrison picked up the photo, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. The woman's features were partially obscured, but something about her seemed familiar. "Find out everything about her," he said, turning to the window. "The riverfront project is too important to be derailed by some distant relative looking for a payday." As Fiona boarded a bus across town, still unable to process her new reality, Harrison stood 42 floors above the city, plotting his next move in a game whose rules had suddenly changed. Neither knew that their separate worlds were about to collide in ways neither could imagine. Glass towers and canvas dreams. The Hawthorne estate stood on 20 acres of wooded land outside the city, a striking blend of glass, stone, and living greenery that seemed to emerge from the landscape rather than impose upon it. As the car Winthrop had arranged pulled up the winding drive, Fiona's breath caught. This wasn't just a house. It was a masterpiece. "I can't possibly live here," she murmured to herself as she approached the front entrance. The Nightingale key slid into the lock with surprising ease, as if welcoming her home. Inside, sunlight streamed through strategic skylights, illuminating spaces that flowed organically from one to another. Living walls of plants purified the air, while heated stone floors gleamed beneath her feet. It was both futuristic and timeless, exactly like the architecture she'd always been drawn to in her sketches. "Hello?" Fiona called, her voice echoing. The house felt both empty and full, vacant of people but filled with meaning. A middle-aged woman appeared from a corridor. "Miss Hawthorne? I'm Vivian Porter, the estate manager. Mr. Winthrop said you'd be arriving today." "It's Reed, actually." "Fiona Reed," she corrected gently. "I haven't decided about the name yet." Vivian nodded, understanding. "Whatever you prefer. Would you like a tour?" As they walked through the house, Fiona learned the building generated its own power through solar panels and geothermal systems. Rainwater was collected and filtered for household use. The materials, all sustainably sourced, had been chosen for longevity and minimal environmental impact. "Your grandmother was decades ahead of her time," Vivian explained. "People called her designs impractical until they realized they saved money and resources while creating healthier living spaces." The tour ended in a light-filled studio at the back of the house. Easels stood ready, and large windows overlooked a Japanese-inspired garden. Against one wall, dozens of leather-bound journals were arranged chronologically. Eleanor's design. "Journals," Vivian said. She documented everything: sketches, ideas, philosophies. She believed architecture should serve people and planet equally. She paused. "I'll leave you to explore. Dinner will be at 7, unless you prefer to dine earlier." Alone in the studio, Fiona moved to the journals with reverence. Opening one from 1982, she found detailed sketches alongside thoughtful observations. Her grandmother's handwriting was remarkably similar to her own, slightly slanted, with distinctive loops on the Y's and G's. "We don't own the earth," one passage read. "We borrow it from future generations. Every structure should return more than it takes." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. All her life she'd felt disconnected, as though missing some essential thread that tied her to the world. Now, through ink and paper, she was finding that thread. At Blackwell Tower, Harrison paced his office, frustration evident in every step. The background check on Fiona Reed had yielded little beyond the basics. 31 years old, no criminal record, employed by Metropolitan Cleaning Services for 3 years, previously working various service jobs. Before age 18, the trail disappeared into the foster system. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "How does someone like this suddenly control the foundation we need for the riverfront project?" Josephine cleared her throat. "There's one more thing, sir. She works here." Harrison stopped pacing. "What?" "Ms. Reed is part of the evening cleaning staff for our executive floors. Has been for 3 years. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The quiet woman with the cleaning cart, the one he'd mistaken for an assistant just days ago, was now his biggest obstacle to the most important development project of his career. "Get her in here," he demanded. "She's given notice," Josephine replied. "Her last day was yesterday." Harrison ran a hand through his hair. "Then I'll go to her. Where's the Hawthorne estate?" Fiona spent the afternoon exploring the house and grounds, each discovery connecting her more deeply to the grandparents she'd never known. In Eleanor's studio, she found her own artistic tendencies reflected back at her through decades of creative expression. As sunset painted the glass walls with golden light, Fiona sat in the garden sketching. For the first time, she wasn't drawing to escape reality, but to understand it. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted her reverie. Setting aside her sketchbook, she walked toward the front of the house, surprised to see a sleek black car pulling up. Even more surprising was the man who emerged from it, Mr. Wells, she said, recognizing the CEO immediately. Harrison looked momentarily taken aback, as if confirming something he'd suspected but hadn't quite believed. "Ms. Reed, or is it Hawthorne now?" "How did you find me?" she asked, conscious of her paint-smudged hands and casual clothes. "I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with," he replied, his tone businesslike, "especially when they control property essential to my company's future." Understanding dawned. "The riverfront project? May I come in? I believe we have matters to discuss." Reluctantly, Fiona led him into the house's main living area. Harrison's assessing gaze took in the architectural features with evident appreciation. "Impressive," he acknowledged. "Your grandmother was talented." "So I'm learning," Fiona replied. "Why are you here, Mr. Wells?" "Blackwell has been negotiating with the Hawthorne Foundation for months regarding the riverfront property. We've made generous offers." "And been declined," Fiona noted. "I reviewed the file this morning." Harrison studied her with new intensity. "The woman who cleaned my office is suddenly reviewing corporate acquisition files?" The dismissive tone stung. "The woman who cleaned your office has always been capable of more than you noticed," she replied evenly. "Just as this property is worth more than Blackwell's offer recognizes." "I'm prepared to increase our offer by 30%, Harrison said, shifting tactics. "It's a prime opportunity for the foundation to liquidate an underutilized asset." Fiona moved to the wall of windows overlooking the property. "Did you know that land was my grandmother's first major project? She transformed a contaminated industrial site into a self-sustaining wetland ecosystem. It's not just land, it's a living laboratory for environmental restoration." "Sentiment doesn't generate returns," Harrison countered. "The foundation could do more good with the capital." Fiona turned to face him. Perhaps. But I'm not making any decisions until I understand what I've inherited, both the responsibilities and the possibilities. Harrison's expression shifted, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't the invisible woman he'd passed in hallways without notice. This was someone with unexpected depth and conviction. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "Neither is this life," Fiona replied, gesturing to the house around them. "But I'm beginning to think I was preparing for it all along without knowing." As the evening light faded, casting long shadows through the glass walls, Harrison found himself seeing not just a business obstacle, but a woman standing at a crossroads, much like the unfinished painting in Fiona's apartment that he would never know about. "Perhaps we could discuss this further," he suggested, his tone softening slightly. "Over dinner, tomorrow evening, a proper business meeting." Fiona considered his offer, recognizing it as both an olive branch and a strategy. "Tomorrow evening, then. But not as adversaries, Mr. Wells, as people trying to find the right path forward." As Harrison drove away, Fiona returned to the studio and opened another of Eleanor's journals. "The greatest designs," she read, "arise not from compromise, but from finding the solution that serves all purposes at once." The words seemed to speak directly to her present situation, a guide from the past illuminating the way forward. Breaking foundations. The Blackwell Tower restaurant occupied the entire 50th floor, offering panoramic views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Fiona arrived precisely at 7, wearing a simple emerald dress she'd found in the Hawthorne Estate's closet. Apparently, her grandmother's taste in classic fashion was as timeless as her architecture. Harrison rose when she approached the table, his usual sharp business attire softened only by the absence of a tie. "Ms. Reed," he greeted her, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for coming." "I believe we agreed on a first-name basis for tonight," Fiona reminded him, settling into her seat, "since we're exploring possibilities rather than drawing battle lines." "Ah," ghost of a smile touched Harrison's lips. "Fiona, then?" The waiter appeared with wine, a vintage that probably cost more than Fiona used to make in a month. As they ordered, she noted how the staff treated Harrison with a deference that bordered on fear. The man across from her wielded power as effortlessly as she once wielded a mop. "I took the liberty of having our research department prepare this," Harrison said when they were alone, sliding a folder across the table. "It outlines potential uses for the riverfront property that would preserve some of its environmental features while allowing for development." Fiona opened the folder to find beautifully rendered architectural plans for a mixed-use complex. "Blackwell Riverside," she read from the cover page. "We've incorporated green spaces, solar arrays, and rainwater collection systems," Harrison explained. "It would be the most environmentally conscious project Blackwell has ever undertaken." The designs were impressive, Fiona had to admit. Yet something felt wrong about them, a superficial application of green elements that missed the deeper philosophy of her grandmother's work. "It's beautiful," she acknowledged. "But it's still primarily luxury condominiums and high-end retail, with sustainability as a marketing feature rather than a foundational principle." Harrison's expression tightened slightly. "The property has been sitting unused for years. Even the most principled foundation needs capital to function." "Actually," Fiona replied, taking a sip of wine, "I've been reviewing the foundation's finances. The investment portfolio generates substantial annual returns, enough to fund operations and grants without liquidating assets." "You've been busy," Harrison observed. "I've had excellent teachers. Edmund Winthrop and the board have been patient with my questions." She smiled. "You'd be surprised how quickly someone who managed to live on a cleaner salary can grasp financial statements." Their appetizers arrived. Seared scallops for her, steak tartare for him. As they ate, the conversation shifted unexpectedly. "Why cleaning?" Harrison asked suddenly. "With your artistic talent, you could have pursued something more creative." Fiona paused, surprised he knew about her art. Josephine mentioned it, I assume? Harrison nodded. She spoke highly of your sketches. Cleaning paid the bills reliably, Fiona explained, and it left my mind free to think about art. When you're invisible to people, you can observe so much. Expressions, movements, the way light falls across a room. It all feeds into my work. I never noticed you, Harrison admitted, discomfort evident in his voice. Not really. Few people did, Fiona said without bitterness. That's how the world works. We see what we're looking for, and most people aren't looking for someone with a mop. The main courses arrived, momentarily pausing their conversation. When it resumed, Harrison steered them back to business. What would it take to change your mind about the riverfront property? He asked directly. Fiona considered the question. I've been studying my grandmother's original vision for that land. She didn't just restore it ecologically. She designed it as the future site of the Hawthorne Institute for Sustainable Innovation, a place where architects, engineers, and environmental scientists could collaborate on solutions to urban challenges. An academic project, Harrison summarized dismissively. A practical one, Fiona corrected. The kind that addresses problems before they become crises. Did you know your Westridge Heights development is already experiencing subsidence issues? Because it ignored the watershed patterns Eleanor documented 30 years ago. Harrison's surprise was evident. How do you know about that? I cleaned the offices where your engineers were desperately trying to solve the problem, Fiona replied. People talk freely when they think no one's listening. The conversation paused as their plates were cleared. When the waiter had gone, Harrison leaned forward, his voice lower. Blackwell needs that riverfront property, Fiona. The board expects this development. Our projections for the next 5 years depend on it. And the Hawthorne legacy depends on me protecting it, she countered. I can't sell just because it would be convenient for Blackwell's bottom line. Harrison's expression hardened. I've been more than fair, more than generous. If you're using this situation to extract an unreasonable price, this isn't about money, Fiona interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. This is about purpose. My grandparents left behind more than assets. They left a vision for how buildings and communities could work with nature instead of against it. Principles don't keep companies afloat, Harrison said sharply. Blackwell employs thousands of people who depend on our continued growth. And the planet supports billions who depend on its health, Fiona replied. I'm not your enemy, Harrison. I'm suggesting there might be a solution that serves both our purposes, if we're creative enough to find it. Their desserts arrived, creme brulee for her, espresso for him. The sweetness on Fiona's tongue contrasted with the tension that had developed between them. What kind of solution? Harrison finally asked, his tone guarded but curious. Before Fiona could answer, a commotion from across the restaurant caught their attention. A man in an expensive suit was approaching their table, his face flushed with either excitement or anger. Wells, the man called. I thought that was you. And this must be the mysterious Hawthorne heir everyone's talking about. Harrison's jaw tightened. Victor, this is a private dinner. Don't be rude, Harrison, Victor chided, his attention fixed on Fiona. Victor Drummond, Crescendo Development. I've been trying to reach you, Ms. Hawthorne. Read, Fiona corrected. Automatically. Forgive the intrusion, Drummond continued. But since Wells here is being territorial, I'll be direct. Whatever he's offering for the riverfront property, Crescendo will pay 20% more, with fewer conditions and faster. Closing. Fiona looked between the two men, understanding dawning. Your competitors. Occasionally, Victor said with a predatory smile. Though Blackwell has been struggling lately, hasn't it, Harrison? That Westridge project turning into quite the money pit with those foundation issues. Harrison's expression remained impassive, but Fiona saw his hand tighten around his espresso cup. Thank you for your interest, Mr. Drummond, Fiona said politely but firmly. But as I've explained to Mr. Wells, the property isn't for sale at present. Victor's smile faltered. Everyone has a price, Ms. Reed. Find yours before you get pulled into corporate games you don't understand. He placed his card on the table. Call me when you're ready for a serious offer. After he departed, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Harrison finally broke it. Drummond is a vulture. His projects cut every corner possible. Yet, he knows about Westridge's problems, Fiona observed, and about me. Information travels, Harrison said grimly, especially when it can be leveraged for profit. He studied her face. You really aren't going to sell, are you? Not in the way either of you want, she confirmed. But I meant what I said about finding a solution that serves multiple purposes. The evening ended with polite but strained goodbyes. As Fiona's car pulled away from Blackwell Tower, she felt the weight of expectations from both her past and present. The grandparents she'd never known had entrusted her with their legacy. The man she'd just left represented a world that saw that legacy only in terms of asset value. Back at the Hawthorne estate, Fiona couldn't sleep. She wandered to Eleanor's studio, turning on the lights and opening journal after journal, searching for guidance. Near dawn, she found it. A passage written just months before the plane crash that claimed her grandparents' lives. True innovation doesn't come from having all the answers, Eleanor had written. It comes from asking better questions. The question isn't how to build walls between competing interests, but how to build bridges that connect them. As sunrise painted the eastern sky with promise, Fiona began to sketch. Not a building or a landscape this time, but a new possibility that might bridge the gap between Hawthorne vision and Blackwell ambition. Whether Harrison would see its value remained to be seen. Rebuilding with light 3 weeks had passed since the dinner at Blackwell Tower. Fiona stood in the vast conference room of the Hawthorne Foundation headquarters, watching as board members, architects, and Blackwell executives filed in. The space, all, reclaimed wood and natural light, reflected Eleanor Hawthorne's philosophy that important decisions should be made in spaces that inspired clarity and connection. At the center of the room stood a detailed architectural model covered with a cloth. Fiona's heart raced as she smoothed her tailored suit, a far cry from the gray uniform she'd worn just a month ago. Beside her, Edmund Winthrop gave an encouraging nod. "They're ready for you," he said quietly. The room fell silent as Fiona took her position at the head of the table. Scanning the faces before her, she found Harrison's, unreadable as always, though perhaps with a hint of curiosity in his gray eyes. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. 4 weeks ago, I was cleaning offices at Blackwell Tower, invisible to most of the people who worked there. Today, I stand before you as Fiona Hawthorne Reed, heir to a legacy I'm only beginning to understand. She gestured to the covered model. The riverfront property has become a point of contention between Blackwell Industries and the Hawthorne Foundation. Mr. Wells sees it as essential to his company's growth strategy. I see it as a cornerstone of my grandparents' vision for sustainable urban development. A murmur passed through the Blackwell executives. Victor Drummond's competing offer had been circulating in business circles, creating pressure on Harrison's position. After considerable research and reflection, Fiona continued, I've concluded that neither selling the property outright nor holding it indefinitely serves the highest purpose of either organization. She removed the cloth, revealing an intricate architectural model. Gasps and whispers filled the room as people leaned forward to see better. This is the Hawthorne Blackwell Innovation Center, Fiona explained, a collaborative development that would unite the strengths of both our organizations while honoring the land's ecological importance. The model showed a striking complex of interconnected buildings that seemed to grow from the restored wetlands rather than imposing upon them. Living roofs extended the green space vertically, while solar arrays and wind captures were integrated as design elements rather than afterthoughts. The center would house three primary components, Fiona continued, indicating different sections of the model. First, the Hawthorne Institute for Sustainable Design, the research center my grandmother envisioned, where architects, engineers, and environmental scientists can develop next-generation solutions for urban challenges. She moved her hand to another section. Second, Blackwell's corporate research division focused on implementing these innovations in real-world projects. And third, a mixed-use development of residential, retail, and community spaces that demonstrate these principles in action. Harrison's expression had shifted from skepticism to interest. The capital requirements for this would be substantial, he noted. Yes, Fiona acknowledged, which is why I'm proposing a joint venture. The Hawthorne Foundation contributes the land and our architectural expertise. Blackwell contributes construction resources and commercial development experience. Profits from the commercial aspects support the research initiatives, creating a self-sustaining model. She turned to face Harrison directly. It's not the luxury development you envisioned, but it offers Blackwell something potentially more valuable, positioning your company at the forefront of sustainable development, with exclusive first access to innovations that will define the next generation of building. The room buzzed with discussion as board members and executives examined the model more closely. Fiona stepped back, allowing them space to consider her proposal. Harrison approached her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "This is ambitious," he said, "and unexpected." "I had a good teacher," Fiona replied. "My grandmother's journals are filled with solutions that looked beyond either-or thinking." "What makes you think Blackwell and Hawthorne can work together?" Harrison asked. "Our priorities have been quite different." "Because they need to be," Fiona said simply. "The challenges facing our cities require both economic viability and environmental responsibility. Neither can succeed without the other in the long term." The discussion continued for hours, with questions about financing, governance, and implementation. By late afternoon, a preliminary agreement had been reached. Pending final approval from both boards, the Hawthorne-Blackwell Innovation Center would move forward. As the meeting concluded, Fiona found herself standing alone by the windows, watching. The setting sun paint the city skyline in amber and gold. Harrison appeared beside her, his usual intensity softened by something like respect. "You've changed everything," he said. "A month ago, I didn't know your name. Now you've redirected the future of my company." Fiona smiled. "I think Eleanor would say I just helped reveal what was already possible if we looked at things differently." "Having reviewed your grandmother's work more carefully these past weeks," Harrison admitted, "I'm beginning to understand why her legacy is so important to you. She wasn't just designing buildings, she was redesigning relationships between people and their environment." "Yes," Fiona agreed, surprised by his insight. "And now, we have a chance to continue that work together." An unexpected warmth colored his voice. "I'd like that." 6 months later, ground was broken on the Hawthorne-Blackwell Innovation Center. The ceremony brought together corporate executives, environmental advocates, and city officials, groups that had often found themselves at odds in the past. Fiona stood at the podium in a simple dress the color of new leaves, the silver nightingale pin at her collar catching the spring sunlight. "My journey to this moment began in shadows," she told the assembled crowd. "As someone unseen, moving through the margins of the very worlds we're now bringing together. That experience taught me something valuable, that sometimes the most important perspectives come from unexpected places." She gestured to the restored wetlands around them, where herons waded through clear waters that had once been contaminated by industrial waste. "This land has its own story of transformation. Once poisoned by short-term thinking, it has healed through careful stewardship and patience." Harrison joined her at the podium for the ceremonial turning of soil. As cameras flashed, he leaned closer. "You never told me what happened to your painting, The Woman at the Crossroads." Fiona looked surprised. "How did you know about that?" "Josephine mentioned it," he explained. "She said it seemed important to you." "It's finished now," Fiona replied. The woman chose a path neither right nor left, but forward, creating her own way. The ceremonial shovels gleamed as they broke ground together, marking not just the beginning of a building, but of a partnership that bridged worlds once separate. In the front row, Edmund Winthrop watched with satisfaction as Eleanor Hawthorne's granddaughter fulfilled a legacy while creating her own. Later that evening, as sunset bathed the city in golden light, Fiona and Harrison walked the perimeter of what would soon become their shared vision made concrete. Their conversation had evolved from cautious negotiation to genuine exchange, each finding in the other an unexpected ally. "When the center is complete," Harrison said, "what will you do next?" Fiona considered the question. "Continue my grandmother's work, but in my own way. There's a whole portfolio of neglected urban sites that could be transformed using the principles we're developing here." "And your art?" Harrison asked. "Will you still find time for that?" She smiled, touched by his remembrance of something so personal. "Always. In fact, I've been commissioned to create paintings for the center's main hall. The theme is invisible threads, the connections we don't see until we change our perspective." Harrison stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun illuminated her profile, highlighting the quiet strength that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. "I've been thinking about perspective," he said, "about how easily we overlook what doesn't immediately serve our purposes. I missed seeing you for years, Fiona. I don't want to make that mistake again." The invitation in his words was clear. Their worlds, once separated by invisible barriers of class and power, had found an unexpected intersection. Whatever grew between them now would be built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than the uneven ground of their first encounters. "Then look carefully," Fiona replied, offering her hand. "There's so much more to see when we truly pay attention." As they continued their walk, planning the future that would rise from this once-forgotten piece of land, the legacy of the past flowed into the promise of what was yet to be built, not just between Hawthorne and Blackwell, but between the woman who had emerged from shadows and the man who had finally learned to see beyond the surface of things. In Eleanor Hawthorne's last journal, she had written words that seemed to reach across time to this moment. "The most sustainable structure of all is one built from understanding, between people, between purposes, between present needs and future possibilities. These are the foundations that truly last." As night fell and the city lights began to sparkle, Fiona and Harrison stood at the center of what would become their shared vision, two people who had found each other across the divide of visibility and power, now creating something neither could have built alone. The invisible girl had been seen at last, not for the fortune she inherited, but for the vision she brought into the light. And in that recognition, both had found something more valuable than any building that would ever rise from this ground. The chance to create a legacy that honored the past while building toward a future neither had imagined possible before their worlds collided.